All right, somehow we got one of the great minds of the NFL to join us on the show, the 2023 Assistant NFL Coach of the Year. The architect of some of the best defenses I've ever watched, back with the Titans, and then most recently with the Browns, where he had the league on fire. Coaching Myles Garrett in that group. Jim Schwartz, thank you for coming on with us.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, so this is an unusual situation for me in the sense that I was fortunate enough to learn from Jim for a number of years in Philadelphia, and we ended up working together in the Super Bowl season against Brady, and we didn't have our best game in that one, but we did just enough to get the championship there, and really it was an incredible experience learning, and I feel like every single day I was learning something new, and I've worked with a number of coaches over the years, and some of them are a little bit hesitant or resistant to trying to use some of the data. And then others are, receptive, which to me, it was always a more favorable situation when there was like a more, open attitude. And, I really appreciate you coming on. And I think what I would start with, and for all of the analytics people that they would appreciate, is really the metrics for the Browns these last couple of years were just like off the charts. And you see these seasons where a team has, say, one, strong defensive year, and defensive stats are often pretty, unstable year to year, where there's like a year where a team might finish second, the next year they're 17th. And so to be able to duplicate it year after year is really an incredible feat. And, I had to check these numbers about 15 different times because, some of these do not even sound real, but over these last 3 years with the Browns, these are just some of the top stats where you guys finished number one. Total yards allowed per play, net passing yards allowed, first downs allowed, third down defense, fourth down defense, 3 and outs forced, opponent EPA, TFLs. I think you were just barely number 2 in sack rate. And these are not things that this is not the first time you've done some of this. Like, you've had the number 1 third down defense in the past a number of times. You've had the number 1 rush defense at times. You've had the number 1, red zone defense, and it's really just an incredible performance. And I think that as people around the league, like as the fans sort of get a little bit more intelligent, they start to realize that some of these metrics that are getting thrown around on social media are a little bit more useful. For example, like expected points added really does adjust for some of the unique circumstances. And what I think a lot of people don't realize is you guys literally faced 51 more drives than any other team in the league over these last 3 years. And unfortunately, the Browns offense was 32nd in offensive EPA. So, though that consideration and the amount of times you guys were facing a 19-yard field, a 26-yard field, like, it really was incredible what you guys accomplished. And like, if I would totally love to hear, you just kind of speak on that experience and what it was like working for the Browns, and like having the dog pound kind of cheer you on, and being able to coach really, almost certainly a Hall of Fame player in Myles Garrett, and what that all really kind of meant to you.
Yeah, certainly a Hall of Fame player. Yeah, so when I took the job in Cleveland, I looked at it a lot before I took the job, because I wanted to see like what kind of difference I could make. It's like, can I do something with this group of players? And right away, the first person comes is Myles, and but no player stands alone. But what I saw is a lot of really good players like Denzel Ward and Martin Emerson and Greg Newsome and just a Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah that basically had sort of underperformed. And I thought that with what I could bring and the emphasis that I could put, that I could make a difference there. And the guys really responded well to what I asked them. I thought we used to play some of those players had the best years of their careers, and we had a lot of fun doing it. Like you said, Ryan, there's a lot of stats that come around, but EPA means a lot because it levels the playing field. Not every drive is different, not every game is different, and it levels the playing field, and it's sort of what your performance is. And the way I look at defense, it's hard to look at it as a whole game. And there's not a lot of things that I can, affect in the game. Like generally you can't score points. We scored we beat Cincinnati last game of the year last year. Myles set the record. And we scored 21. I think we scored 21 on defense. But not many times you can do that. Our job mainly, and the way we looked at it, was how do we minimize points in the game? And you got to go a step farther, because you got to look at it. You got to say, okay, how do I minimize points in this drive? And we all know that every drive is not the same. If an offense starts on their own 1 yard line, that's a different equation, trying to minimize points on that drive than if they start on in field goal range in the plus 35. So we took a lot of pride in that. Took a lot of pride in being resilient and trying to hold the score down enough. There were times where we were really challenged on offense, but hold the score down enough to be able to have a chance in the game. And I was really proud of what we were able to do, proud of the players, proud of the coaches. Like you said, that's a 3-year run. So there was an old-time NFL coach that I was at 2 different stops with, a guy named Gunther Cunningham. And Gunn was super, super old school. And he used to tell me all the time, he would just go like this. He would just put 3 fingers up. And he'd say, anybody can have success 1 year. You get lucky with injuries. You get lucky with opponent injuries. You get a couple breaks. The ball bounces your way a couple times. Anybody can have a good year. He said, do it over 3 years and then come back and talk to me. And I think one of the reasons was Gunn had one of the greatest 3-year runs of all time when he was at KC, with Derek Thomas and Chester McLaughlin and Neil Smith and Dale Carter. I mean, they were just incredibly, incredibly good. But yeah, we take a lot of pride in what we did over those 3 years. And but the main thing was the expected points, because that was our job. Our job's try to hold points down the best we could.
How much does that change, like how you're calling a game when it is that tight and you get further into it and it kind of becomes apparent that maybe those points aren't going to be there? I kind of looked at last year, week 7 to 12, like you guys had that stretch where I think you had like 29 sacks and it was just like everything was really, really tight on offense. Like, how does that change your mindset? Like when you're in like the third quarter of a game, or it's just like really apparent that it's kind of on your side of the ball to win the game?
Well, yeah, Nick, it's not just, it's just not at certain spots. Like when you're challenged to score, you don't have any house money to play with.
Yeah.
You're part of those defenses where, the offense is great. And you got some margin for error, and you can be real aggressive with a call because, hey, whatever, you give up a touchdown, the offense is going to get the ball back and score. Ryan mentioned the Super Bowl game against New England. And like we hung in the first half, and second half they came back and they just went to Gronk every play for like 3 series, and we could not stop him. It was just like he was like a 3-pointer that, a 3-point shooter that just couldn't miss. And he scored 3 straight touchdowns. But New England couldn't stop Nick Foles and Zach Ertz and our offense. We got to that, it was the second to last drive, and we were up, I think, 5 points. And there's Tom Brady with the ball in like his own 20. And I went to the head coach. I went to Doug, and I'm like, Doug, if they get a couple first downs, I am going to zero blitz every play, because I'm either going to stop them or I'm going to get the ball back for you. Or I'm not letting you not have the ball last in this game, because our offense was like unstoppable. They would have given me that house money. Now, I think it was the first or second play of that series. We got the sack strip, we kicked the field goal, then we went up 8, and now you got a little bit of margin, and we were able to withstand the Hail Mary at the end of that game. But yeah, house money, it makes you play it a little bit closer, because like if you get behind a touchdown or you get behind 10 points, it's going to be really hard after that. And it's just, you have to do what's best for the team, and what's best for the team sometimes is being a little bit more conservative and trying to keep the score down, as opposed to, let it rip. If they score, that's fine. Our offense is going to go back and score again.
Yeah, I'd say, more recently, some teams and even some analysts are doing a better job of sort of classifying scenarios, like some kind of filter for like statistics, like for example, like anytime the win probability is less than 10% or greater than 90%, like reducing those, because they really aren't really telling much of the story. And you might just get, like, you've been a part of it. Like you have these fourth quarter games and you're up 3 scores and you're telling everyone in cover 4, just GTFB, like, remember that one?
Yep.
Yeah. And,
GTFB.
and some of these coordinators, some of these guys are still
get the F back. Right. They can have all the, I had a season like that, Brian. I think it was 2003 with the Titans. We led the NFL in third down percentage, crazy good, like 28%. It was like the lowest third down percentage forever. We were last in the NFL in passing yards allowed. And, a lot of the fans and people in the media were upset, why are they so bad stopping the pass? And it's like, well, we're not. Like, you can't be 27% or 28%, whatever we were on third down, and not be able to stop the pass. We were a really good team. We'd score 30 and I'd empty the bench. We'd be middle of the fourth quarter and, we'd empty the bench because that game was won. And number one, we didn't want to get guys injured at the end of a blowout, stack grabbing. Mm-hmm. And number two, as long as we didn't do something stupid and give up a quick score, we were going to win the game. So sometimes as a coach, you got to swallow your pride a little bit and you got to say, yeah, my stats aren't going to look great here. But it's best for the team. We were playing Miami that year, and I'm friends with Norv Turner, and he came up to me and he's like, "Man, you guys are so good," and we were a good defense. And I'm like, "Yeah, not if you ask people around here." And he's like, "What are you talking about?" I'm like, "We're last in the NFL in pass defense," and he's like, "What?" He's like, yeah. I said, I talked about like, well, we give up 250 yards in the fourth quarter because we're protecting a lead and we're perfectly willing to give you yards in exchange for clock. And he goes, I don't even watch those. I turn those off. Those plays don't mean anything to me. So I do think the analytical crew sort of did a good job with that because we do truncate games where, we're either too far behind or too far ahead. And we get rid of those for stats for offense too. We don't want to get a run pass tendency that's skewed because the team's down 28 points with 3 minutes left in the third quarter. Scratch those. Those really aren't tendencies. It's just a game tendency. Or same thing. They're up 28 and they're just running the ball every play. Well, are they running it because on second and seven, they like to run? Or they like to run out of this trips formation, or they running it because they're saying, hey, warm the bus up, this game's over, and they're just trying to shorten the game. So that stuff didn't really exist before the analytics crowd sort of brought that to the forefront. And I think now you see a lot of that with things like Aaron Schatz, that he started with the DVOA stuff. And, those kind of things. It's more about like, what are you doing in that situation as opposed to just the raw numbers.
Are there any that like beyond DVOA and EPA that, are kind of your go-to ways of evaluating that actually have meaning and context?
Yeah, there's a lot of things that are important to us. Anything that stops a drive. I mentioned before, Nick, that my goal or my job is to minimize points as a defensive coordinator. And you minimize those by getting stops, whether it's a stop for a field goal or a stop for a punt or a stop for a turnover. So anything that got the ball back for our offense, red zone percentage, takeaways, third down percentage, and then also sacks and tackles for loss. Because obviously, if you get a sack or a tackle for a loss on a third down or fourth down, you've won that drive. You got the ball back. But also, if it's 1st and 10 and you get a sack for 8 yards and it's 2nd and 18, as long as you don't do something stupid on 2nd and 3rd down, you're gonna get the ball back right there. So anything that put the offense behind the chains. That's why we led the NFL in TFLs and, like Brian said, like 2nd in sack rate, but by just a whisker and those things. But we were always trying to emphasize, take them off schedule, put them behind the sticks. Offenses want to stay on schedule. 1st and 10, 2nd and 6, 3rd and 2. with a potential fourth down play in there now. We were trying to put them behind and say, okay, it's 2nd and 12, it's, 3rd and 15. And, so basically all those things became important because those are the ways to minimize points on a drive. And it's anything that stops the drive.
Yeah. So speaking of stopping drives, the whole rage right now in the NFL is everyone in the media space and the social media space wants to talk about too high. And very interesting, as we talked about all these rankings that you guys finished number 1 in, your defenses have been essentially number 1 in single high usage. And can you talk a little bit about what your rationale is there? Really, how do you come to that? Is it related to the roster? Is it related to, philosophy? It'd be very interesting to hear that.
Yeah, Ryan, the answer to that is it fit us. I mentioned when I took the job there in Cleveland after the 2022 season. And when I watched their 2022 season, there were just so many missed assignments. And you're sitting with the coaches and it's like, what happened? Oh, this guy should have made this call and he didn't. This guy missed this call or this is, and it was just so much stuff for free. And they were playing a lot of split safety. And Joe Woods is a really good defensive coordinator. But you also had Denzel Ward and Greg Newsome and Martin Emerson, and you had really good corners. And imagine telling Denzel Ward, hey, look, we want you to cover Jamar Chase, but we don't want you to look at Jamar Chase. We want you to look at number 2. And if number 2 breaks out, let's say it's a little gray area, 5 to 7 yards, maybe a little less, maybe a little bit more. But if he breaks out, then we want you to drop Jamar Chase and we want you to play the outbreaker and play the flat. But if he doesn't break out and he continues to go vertical or he eliminates inside, we want you to get your eyes back and now look at Jamar Chase and cover him. And it's like, that's impossibly hard. Right. I mean, and when you have a guy like Denzel that can cover, we just said, hey, look, why don't you just worry about covering Jamar Chase and quit looking at number 2? So we streamlined a lot of things. We had the corners. I thought those 3 guys, and then adding Tyson Campbell last year, I thought those guys were the best corners in the league. We pumped their tires that way and said, you guys are the best corners. We're going to put a lot of pressure on you. Generally playing single high, you put yourself in good positions to stop the run. And we also try to eliminate all the easy throws across the middle that teams would feast on split safety defense, particularly cover 2, because you take away the outside part of the field. Well, you give them the easy completion, the in breakers on the inside part of the field. The ball comes out super fast. And what does that do for Myles Garrett? That doesn't let him get to the quarterback. So if we could take the easy answers away in the middle of the field and we could force the teams out to our best players outside and we could make them buy a little bit of time for Myles to get home, then it was a good situation for us. So that was sort of our thing. In my career, there's been some seasons where we really emphasized split safety. There's some seasons that we were bigger blitz teams than others. The biggest thing is what fits your personnel, what fits your team, and how do you best use guys. I worked for Bill Belichick back 93 to 95, and Bill's famous for taking away what the offense does best, right? He calls it make the offense play left-handed. And he says, his first part of every game plan was, okay, what do they do best? Okay, they're going to have to beat us some other way, but we're not going to let them beat us that way. So that was a big part early in my career. But later in my career, I started maybe 60-40, and then maybe the last couple of years it's been more 75-25. But 75% of what do you do well? What's your best pitch? As opposed to what's, put it in baseball terms, there's a guy that has trouble hitting off-speed pitches, but you can throw 104, and your changeup's not that good or your breaking ball's not that good. Well, do you want to do what he struggles with, or do you want to do what you're good at? And I've sort of taken that approach as my career's gone on and emphasize more okay, let's concentrate more on what we do well and then we'll adapt it for each team, and we'll have little tweaks here and there. But probably, I guess 75% of my game plans have been what we do well and trying to put us in the best position, and as opposed to reacting to an offense.
How would that change your team building approach? I mean, that's kind of fascinating that like you're just finding guys, highlighting their superpowers and going around that. Like, as you're building a team, like, does that open up your options of like what you could bring in and how you're featuring guys?
Well, sure. You always have to work hand in hand with the number one, the talent that you have, and then also how you're acquiring talent. And that's the communication between coaches and front office, is they have to know what you're going to require of a player and how you're going to use a player. Players' talent doesn't stand alone. A lot of the same guys that we had in 2023 and had a great defensive season had been there the year before in 2022. It's just trying to find out what they do well and put them in that position, and then communicate that to the front office. These are the things that we value in players. This is the way we're going to use them. And when they see that success, it makes it easier for those guys to keep, to keep feeding you players that fit and everything else. But when it's all said and done, you have to do what your players can do. Early in my career, my first year as a coordinator, I failed that way. It's 2001. We had come off 2000 year at Tennessee, the best defense in the league. 2001, we got wiped out. Free agency and injuries. I lost 5 of our top 6 defensive backs, and we were a very, very complicated defense. It was old Buddy Ryan stuff, a lot of at the line, a lot of communication, and we had like 10-year veterans in that defense: Blaine Bishop, Marcus Robertson, Eddie Robinson, like 3 of our linebackers and our 2 safeties, which were the nerve center in the defense. Those guys were all 8+ years in the defense, and they could handle anything. Motion, nothing bothered them. They could make all the calls, do it all. Well, we lost almost all of those guys, and I kept beating my head against the wall because I kept trying to expect rookies to do the same that the 10-year players had done. And we were just so up and down, and it was, well, if this guy had made this call, then we would have, we could have accomplished that. But then after a while, as a coach, you got to look at it and say, well, he's not ready to make that call. Hit the point of his career, that's not a good situation. So what I should have done then is I should have changed tactics to best use the players that I had. Didn't feel like I had the license to do that. We were coming off the year as, number one defense, and we finished 7-9, and I didn't do a good job. I learned my lesson. Ryan was there in 2018 with the Eagles. 2017, we were single high Seattle team, right? We played a lot of, we call it 3 zombie, a little different than Seattle. We sort of made it our own, but a lot of single high, and that was what worked for us. And we had a bunch of injuries, and particularly in the secondary, but we were still good up front. We still have Fletcher Cox and Brandon Graham, and we have Michael Bennett and Chris Long, and, just a bunch of really good players up front. But we got wiped out in the secondary, and we had to go to a completely different scheme, and we had to turn into a bend but don't break defense. And we had guys that were good tacklers, that were tough, and we changed scheme. We played a lot of zone concepts. We bent but don't break. We were great in the red zone, and we turned it around. That season looked like it was over. We got beat by Dallas. It looked like it was over. We went on a run. Nick Foles came in again. And we got down to the end. We were a drop ball away from probably beating. We beat Chicago on the road in the playoffs, and we're basically one catch away from beating New Orleans. And it was all because I learned the lesson from 2001. It was like, hey, what worked the year before might not be what's best for this group of guys. I tell the players a lot. I always try to put it in different things and tell the coaches the same way. You guys see the movie Apollo 13, Tom Hanks, the Apollos, they're in trouble and everything else. Well, there was one scene where their carbon dioxide was just going up, and they didn't have like carbon dioxide scrubbers in the module that they were in. They were in the other thing that had gotten damaged. And Anyway, they're all talking, with the engineers back in Houston, and they're all saying, "Well, I need this, I need this, I need this, I need this," and the flight commander, the guy who was played by Ed Harris, he walks into the room and puts a box down that had a bunch of crap in it, and he goes, "Well, look, I know what you need. This is what we have, and you got to make a CO2 scrubber out of this." And then it's like, okay, tear the cover off of the flight manual and, do all jerry rig, all this different things. Well, football is no different, right? You'd love to be able to, like whatever, sometimes it's like, hey, look, I'd love to be able to blitz, but we can't, we can't cover well enough to be able to blitz. Or, hey, I'd love to be able to play the zone concept, but we're not fast enough. 2008 with the Titans, we were a Tampa 2 team with the Titans. We played a lot of just spot drop 3, spot drop 2. We had Hainsworth. We had the best linebackers in the league, Stephen Tulloch, David Thornton, Keith Bullock. We had a really, really good defense. We didn't have to do anything else. And we were really good playing visual zone because we were so fast. We could clock the quarterback with Van den Bosch and Hainsworth rushing the passer. And we just suffocate everybody. I went to Detroit the next year as the head coach, and we could not play Tampa 2 because we didn't have a pass rush and we weren't fast enough to overlap the zones. So we had to go to more of a match-based cover 4 to be able to put our guys closer to the to the receivers to try to mitigate or make up for the fact that, they weren't as quick and weren't fast. That goes on every year. I think I've been humble enough over the course of my career since 2001 as a play caller that I know it's not about me. It's about what the players can handle, what the players can do. And I think I've developed over the years to be able to put whatever my ego is aside and say, this is what's best in this situation for these players.
Just to follow up on that, I mean, 25-year span calling plays at the top for that long is obviously pretty rare. And that's an obvious area of evolution over that time. Are there any other like big areas of evolution where, over the last couple decades that you feel like you've changed and grown and have made you an even better coach now than you were back with the Titans?
Yeah, I mean, you're 100% right when you say evolution, because in this league, nothing lasts forever. You can have limited success or you can have some success with something. The offense is going to catch up a couple of years later. Defense is going to catch up, right? You don't see those, those long runs. And Ryan mentioned before how, traditionally up and down defenses are over the course of years. A lot of good offenses, particularly with good quarterbacks, can level that out. But defense is a lot up and down. That's probably the one of the ones. Probably one of the biggest changes to the way I've called things has just come recently, and it was due to 2 things. One is these kickers that can bomb 70-yard field goals. Like it used to be, and the aggressiveness of coaches to allow them to kick 62, 63-yard field goals. Used to be like you could draw a line. It's like, okay, well, if we can stop teams by the 35-yard line, they're going to have to punt, and we're going to get away with no points on the board. That's changed. That dynamic completely changed. And then a couple of years ago, when you put the new kickoff rule in, it changed the whole deal. Like way back for all my years in the NFL, starting in '93, the special teams coach would always start kickoff meeting, installation training camp. Our goal is to tackle them inside the 20, right? A touchback wasn't good enough, starting them at the 20. We want to get them down inside the 20, hang time, getting off blocks, hauling ass down the field, everything else. That's completely changed. Now it's almost like if they're not starting at the 35, you're happy. But that's almost 2 first downs. That gave me time to be able to play. If we started a drive on the 17, I gave up a first down, or we gave up a first down, not a big deal. We could still stop that drive. Now, if you start a drive on the -38, they get a first down, they get 15 yards. Some of these guys are in field goal range already.
Yeah.
So I mentioned before that, I had done a bunch of regression analysis. I'm an economics major from college, trying to minimize scoring. That changed the whole dynamic of minimizing scoring because of the attempts for field goals and and how far those guys could kick it and the kickoff. Now you combine that with the aggressiveness to go for it on fourth down. Way back in the day, it was 4th and 2 on the 48 or 3rd and 2 on the 38 or 48. And you got an incomplete pass, man. You were high-fiving. Those guys were coming off the field, and you got the punt team that was trying to pin you back. Now you got to play another down. So those things have really changed, like my equation. Way back in the day, if it was 3rd and 15, I did not care at all about giving up 12 yards. Hey, punt team's coming on the field. Yeah, 12 yards doesn't look good. It's not good for your stats. But if it forced the punt team to come on, now if that 12 yards makes it 4th and 3 and it's anywhere near midfield or plus territory, you're playing another down. So that changed my calls more to be a little bit more aggressive in some of those situations. When I was at Philly, we played a defense I called fence, where we rushed 4 guys and we lined everybody up at 15 yards. And, Ryan probably remembers that. They had crazy success. It was like over a 3-year period or 4-year period we were running it. It was like 36 out of 37 wins. But I got away from running that because so many times it was 3rd and 14 and we gave up 10 or 12 yards. And now offenses were going for it on 4th down. So kickers, the kickoff rule, and the aggressiveness to go for it on 4th down has changed life for defensive coordinators.
Yeah, I'd say I had a little bit of a unique situation with these long kickers in the sense I worked with Cam Little in Jacksonville, and we had some data there where he was just very easily bombing these things, like. And the guy's 21 years old. It almost was a little bit similar to basketball and baseball, where, you get these investments in really young guys because they have like the development potential. But Cam Little was incredibly young and he was kicking field goals from 68. Yeah. This is 68 prior to the K-ball change this last year. And then anyway, we're playing them this last year in Las Vegas, and we're playing great defense, and we kick off. They end up at the 31-yard line. They get one completion right before halftime to the 50, and they trot out Cam Little, and he goes and he sets the NFL record right in our face. We end up losing it, in overtime. But it's like these things really change everything. And Buffalo was playing Jacksonville in the playoffs, and all anyone was thinking about, Jacksonville ended up turning it over. But all anyone was thinking about was like, all right, Cam Little, like this is. It's a real weapon, whether it's the Cowboys or Jacks, even some of these guys that were like really capped at maybe 55, like they can hit these things from over 60 now, and it changes a lot.
It changes everything. I was in Detroit. I think it was 13. We were playing the Ravens, and we're holding like a 2-point lead late in the game, and they got the ball around midfield, and they were faced with, I want to say like a 4th and 3 or something like that, but it was a 4th down, and it was going to be like a 61 or 62 yard field goal. And they're going for it. And then all of a sudden at the last minute, here comes Justin Tucker running on the field. And I remember saying, they're going to try a 62 yard field goal, 61. We got a much better chance of winning the game, him missing a 61 or 62 yard field goal, than stopping a 4th and 3 or whatever that distance was. We were almost relieved. It was like we were telling everybody, like, watch the fake, like you didn't think you were going to get beat by that. He hit that thing. That thing was good from 70. I mean, that thing, it sounded like a cannon went off and when that hit his foot. But yeah, that changed the aggressiveness of those kickers and how good those guys are. Those poor guys are the only guys on the field that when they mess up, everybody watching or everybody in the stands knows. A quarterback can throw an interception, right? And everybody, well, was that the receiver's fault? Did he break the wrong way? Like whose fault really was it? A guy can give up a sack. Was he expecting help outside? Was he expecting help inside? Was that really his sack? Field goal kickers have lived all over the years with whether they made it or not. And I don't think people realize how elite those guys are. And it's changed the game. It's, like you're in scoring range all the time. People have gone. We used to run 2-minute drills in practice. And the whole idea was like, okay, the line to gain or the line to stop was like the 32-yard line, because that was equivalent to like a 50-yard field goal, right? It's like, all right, hey, look, we're up 2. We got a minute to play. This is the scenario. They got the ball on their own 25. They got a minute to play, and we're up 2. And the first thing you do to the defense is you'd say, okay, the goal line is the 32-yard line, because that's a 50-yard. And nobody's going to make a 52-yarder. If they do, shake their hand, tip your cap to them, and they won the game. But that's completely changed now. I mean, you get to end the game and you get the ball anywhere near the 50, just about all these guys. It's not just Cam Little or, the guy down in Dallas or anybody else. They can all do it. It's a complete game changer from analytics, from calling the game on offense, but then also calling the game on defense.
Jim, when offenses change and there's like a trend taking hold in the league right now, I guess it would be the McVay 3 tight end thing. You see everybody trying to build their team and emulate it. What's the process for you guys on the defensive side, like trying to find the counter punch and be prepared for like that coming in and being a big league-wide thing?
Yeah, I mean, I'd say go back farther, and you really go back. For years, teams used 12 personnel, 2 tight ends, 2 wide receivers, 1 back. They used 12 personnel because they were getting these tight ends that were really, really good receivers, might not be great blockers, but people were playing base defense to 12 personnel. And they were like, okay, we can make up a name, Tony Gonzalez. We can get him on a linebacker, and that's a great matchup for us. And that's what we're going to, and we can exploit them in the passing game. So defenses started playing more 3 safeties and playing big nickel to 12 personnel. When I was in Philly, we called it quarter defense. You had nickel, dime, and quarter. But Malcolm Jenkins played all that stuff for us. He was fantastic. He could play basically a safety position, a linebacker position. He'd move himself around in the defense to put himself at the hardest position. But we could neutralize those teams that use 12 personnel with those guys to minimize the matchups in the passing game. Recently, the offenses have started, in order to try to attack big nickel and even a lot of the split safety stuff. Now they've circled back to running the ball out of 12 and getting some good blocking tight ends. Say, hey, look, if they're going to match, I mean, Buffalo always matched like nickel. They didn't play big nickel. They just played nickel against everything. And then it was like, okay, you got 12 personnel. We're going to have to run the ball. And if you can't, then you can never chase the team out of big nickel. So that's why you're seeing a lot more teams run out of those and put an extra offensive lineman in. Last year we played a lot more base defense than I've ever played, probably for maybe 8 to 10 years. We played a lot more base defense because it was that trend toward, using the tight ends as blockers as opposed to using them as wide receivers. Sean has always blurred the lines of all his players, that they can, like 11 personnel can sort of play as 12 because they have all their guys are good blockers. I respect all those guys, those wide receivers that are block, all those defensive guys love those guys. They hate playing against them, but they all want them on their team. But Sean you circle back like 2000 and maybe 17. Sean was almost exclusively 11 personnel with the Rams, but 11 could play as 12 because all their wide receivers could block, and it could really even play as 13. They just get in a bunch and run duo, and all those guys could go down and block. So it forced you, it made it a lot thinner for you on defense because they weren't one dimensional. Plus with Sean, all his guys were interchangeable. Todd Gurley was the running back. He could line up as a wide receiver and not just one or 2 routes. He could run the whole route tree. So their tight ends could all run the wide receiver routes. Their wide receivers could all block. Their running backs could all run so 11 personnel is like, okay, well, what do you do? Well, you got to have multi-dimensional guys on defense. The best I ever had with that was Malcolm Jenkins. Jenkins could play, like I said, he could play nickel. He could play dime. He could play linebacker. He could play Mike linebacker. He could play deep safety. You need players like that can erase those offenses, because I'm sure Sean is just sitting there looking. He's at 13 personnel. Well, he can play it as true 13, and those guys will all block as tight ends, where a lot of times you want to get big on defense and not even be in base, but you want to go to an extra back or an extra defensive lineman or an extra safety, take one of your corners out so you can match that. Well, he can easily spread you out. He can say, okay, well, hey, they're an extra backer. Well, okay, well, I'm going to spread out. We're going to turn this 13 into 11. Just because it's 13 personnel doesn't mean he's treating it like 13. He could be treating it like 11, and it based on what you do. And if you're staying small, then he can say, okay, they say small. All right, well, then we're going to run the ball. I'm going to put these guys all in blockers positions. Offensive players that can blur the lines and offensive coordinators that emphasize that makes it really difficult on defensive coaches. And he's one of the best at doing it. And then you just have to say, okay, well, what are you prioritizing on defense? And you can't just you can't out personnel somebody saying, okay, well, we're in nickel, so they don't have anything. Or we're in base, so they don't have anything. You got to have multi-dimensional players in there, particularly safeties and linebackers, that can do a little bit of both to try to negate what the 13 personnel. But again, just because it's 13 that Sean throws out there doesn't mean it's 13 for him. It could be 12. It could be 11. All his guys are interchangeable, and quarterback has confidence in all of them, and it just. If when you're an offensive coordinator, you're trying to limit the defense's options, right? And you feel like, okay, well, if we play this personnel group, they'll get in this, and they're limited in these areas. This is where they have the least amount of scheme. This is they're most predictable when we're in this. Well, 13 personnel was one of those places that defenses were predictable. It's forced teams now to get out of that. And now you have to have a bigger package to be able to play those things. And you have to have multi-dimensional. If you don't have corners that can tackle, you're dead. You're dead because they're just going to run I'm not going to block the corner. And they're just going to run right over you and kill you. So you got to have corners that can tackle. You have to have safeties that can play in the box. You got to have linebackers that can potentially walk out of the box when they do break the formation. He's one of the best. I mean, Sean LaFleur, Kyle Shanahan, those are the guys that were the greatest challenges. And, they're all from that same family tree.
I would say, I found it really interesting just because so many people have talked about the 13 personnel thing. Like it's as if 90% of the snaps this year are going to be 13 personnel. And it was like maybe a couple weeks.
But just because it's 13 doesn't mean, you can throw it's like this. Is 13 good if you're putting a crappy tight end out there? No, there's no magic. There's no magic in 13. You're putting good players out there and using them.
The best part was that, Stafford was on a podcast, I think, with Chris Long, and he said they had 0 snaps practicing 13 last camp. And it basically became something they did in season, partly because they were banged up, but partly because
they
like
had
you said,
injuries at wideout. Yeah.
They run the same, they can line up in a big trips alignment with 3 10 ends and run duo. They can line up in a bunch with an 11 or 12. They can
line up an empty.
They can do all sorts of
empty.
It's the same thing. And so I think it's a very interesting statistical thing because on a macro level, if you say like, all right, how good is 13 personnel on 1st and 10 in the NFL? It hasn't been that good on balance. But if teams really are giving that a shot this year, like you're going to see some copycats that are not succeeding. So I think it might be one of those things 4 weeks in the year that you see like 4 or 5 teams are at 40% of their first downs are in 13 and they start abandoning it because obviously like and kind of like what you talked about, like, what are you good at? What is your identity? Like sometimes these teams, they copycat these offenses and they're not really sure what exactly are the rules on this? Like, do we have receivers that can insert? Okay. Do we, like what is going into these plays? Are we just doing it because Sean McVay's doing it and everybody's talking about it on ESPN? Like, and so I think that's going to be an interesting one. And I think it would be kind of like the ultimate troll by McVay if he comes out and plays like no 13, because that is a real possibility that he might do that.
Well, Ryan, you know me, like how many times did you hear from me? Just because it was good for somebody else doesn't mean it's going to be good for us. Right. Like you have to be able to have the personnel to be able to execute that. We were a really good big nickel team when I was in Philly. Was that because of the big nickel scheme? Was that because of some magic behind it? No, it was because we had Malcolm Jenkins, who was really, really good in that role. And we had Corey Graham that could replace Malcolm at the safety. And then we had Jordan Hicks and Nigel Bradham that could flip-flop between Mike and Will. And it made them all interchangeable. We were immune to jet motions. All those guys could melt into all the different positions. That's why we were good. It wasn't just like, rolling it out and saying, checkmate, we're in big nickel. No, it's the players that you're putting out there. And I think young coaches, a lot of times, they chase other teams' success without sort of looking like, okay, well, why are they having success? Is it the scheme? Is it just really hard? Or is it because of the players they're doing with? Sometimes it's a little bit of both. Sometimes maybe it's 75 one, 25 another. But I think probably about the biggest mistake I see in coaches is people trying to copycat stuff that they don't it doesn't fit them real well, or they don't have a good grasp of. So I had a guy that I've mentored over the years in the NFL, and he became a defensive play caller last year. And he was getting ready to call his first game, and he said, "Hey, you have any advice?" And I said, "Yeah, call stuff that works." And he sort of laughed. He's like, "Yeah." And I'm like, "No, that's it." He goes, "Don't feel like you need to do something just to do it. Call stuff that fits you, that fits the offense that you're playing against. And, do you want to be good, or do you want to be innovative?" Right? Because sometimes they're mutually exclusive. I see a lot of defenses around the league, and, they'll do something that's like, wow, that was really good. And then you're looking up and, they're, 31st in the league in defense. And you're like, maybe that was the fool's gold that they were chasing. They're chasing all this, I call them junk defenses, but they're chasing all that extra scheme because they can make a play every once in a while, but in the totality, they're hurting themselves when they do it. So it's, so much of it is dependent not just on your players, but just like we talked about before, what your personality of your whole team is. If you have, part of Seattle's Legion of Boom success was the fact that they had Marshawn Lynch and they had Pete Carroll, and they ran the ball a bunch. And holy mackerel, you talk about just lining up in single high and saying that's what we're doing. They were some crazy 93% or 92% single high. They never played cover 2, hardly ever played cover 4 or 6 or anything like that. They lined up, played 3 and 1, and they just bludgeoned everybody. They had a good pass rush. They had good corners. It fit them. They never made a mistake. They were a good tackling team but also it went hand in hand with what they did on offense and the way they shortened the game with Marshawn Lynch and the way they ran the ball. So all those things go into how you're going to play it on defense. Like I said, if you're scoring 30 points a game, well, you can be aggressive and throw a call out there and say, yeah, this is risky, but we might cause a turnover. If they give up a touchdown, we'll get it back. Sometimes you can't say that. So, you never stand alone as an offensive play caller or as a defensive play caller. I imagine it's the same way on offense. You can't punt if your defense is terrible, right? It's like, God, we punt, we're going to be down 14. We're down 7 already. We got to go for it on 4th down. So it all plays hand in hand. If you have a great defense, maybe it forces you to go for it less on the 4th downs. You're not as aggressive in those situations because it's like, yeah, our defense can stop them. That got us in Philly. We're playing the Super Bowl year. We're playing Atlanta, and it's a low scoring game. I think that game finished, Ryan, it was 15-10, maybe.
Yep.
It was something like that. The offense had a hard time getting going. Yeah, the offense had a hard time getting going. And our offense had 4th and goal at the 1 or the 2 late in that game. And I don't know, I don't think I've ever talked to you about this, but what the thought process was, we went for it all the time. And there was, 5 minutes left in that game, and we kicked a field goal. And to go up, I think the field goal put us up 5.
Yes.
And I was shocked on the sideline. I'm like, what happened to this aggressive? Because if we score a touchdown there, now it's a 2-score game, and I can play guys back, don't take any chances, and we're going to win the game. But we kicked a field goal, and I was like, in my mind, I'm like, I wanted to go to Doug and like, they got Matt Ryan and they got Julio Jones, and they're about the best offense in the league. But it was that same. What went into that decision when we kicked there? Because I think part of it had to do with how good we were playing on defense. And Doug was like, look, we're playing lights out on defense. We've completely shut these guys down. So I don't have to go for it on fourth. So you can tell me on that.
So I'd say in my entire career of helping out coaches during the games, I got criticized on that one more than any. And even though we won the game, but I got nailed on that it was an anti-analytics move. And I'm going to tell you, I've never talked about this publicly, why I did this. And again, like I can say why I communicated what I did. At the end of the day, Doug made the decision that he made. But one of the issues with the model that I was using, and it's an imperfect process, is these extreme, like low score event games. That the model is like the spread was being captured correctly in the model. Every model ever uses the spread to factor in, like, are we an underdog? Are we favored? Kind of handle those. But even then, the spread is relatively meaningless by the fourth quarter, like in terms of what the model recommendations are. But the top times that the model kind of misses the mark was in these very low score event games. Say it's like a rain fest or snow or just like extreme wind. And so as we're playing that moment out, they had not driven the whole field the entire game. The only time they scored was like a punt. It was like a hit, like Brian Brayman or something, if you remember that. Like, and then so they basically got a freebie, like from our own from the plus 20 yard line. But over the course of an entire game, they had not shown one time to drive the entire length of the field. And the wind was pretty significant in that game as well, if I remember correctly. And so between those variables, and our offense was not doing well, like it was a struggle, and even some of our short yardage runs were like barely getting it. Like I think, Blunt, we had a previous fourth and one where Blunt's like breaking tackles to convert and whatnot. But between all those variables, the going from 2 to 5 is a tricky proposition because some of the analytics people are very supportive of going for it anyways there. And my thinking there, at the time that the play ended, it appeared that it was 2 yards to go. Like, because you have to try to communicate these things pretty quick. I think it was
it ended up less. It ended up 1, I think. Yeah.
I was like mad at the refs when they moved it closer. So I'm like, oh, you're killing me, because that obviously does factor into that. But I think we ended up at, say, like it was something like the 5 or 6 yard line was the decision of so it wasn't right on the goal line, but it was quite close. And between the wind, we had obviously played great defense. I had known too, like I felt like we had an amazing game plan for in the red zone. Like we had a good beat on them in terms of like, we were a great red zone defense at times. Like we were just like, and we remember when we would just basically play like we play one defense, like 98% of snap.
But I tell the players, don't get tired of hearing it because I'm not going to get tired of calling it. Yeah.
So we get to the situation and it looked like it was 2. And what I said is I probably would kick a field goal. And this was, because I didn't have a true way to capture the win conditions, the low scoring events. Like if that situation came up in the first quarter, it would not even blink. Like we're going for it, like it's not even close. But and that's another thing.
Or if we hadn't been playing good defense, then you got to go for it.
Yeah.
But they had like a 4th and 5 around midfield, and Matt Ryan hit Julio Jones. Just a great throw and a great catch. Jenks is all over him, covered him, and they got that first down. And then they got down, and they have 4 shots at our end zone. I think it was 1st and goal from like the 8 yard line or something. And calling red zone defense was really easy for me that year. We played red 3, and we knew it really well. It fit us. We were really good at it. And like I said, I tell the players all the time, don't get tired of hearing it because I'm not going to get tired of calling it. And 4 straight times we called red 3 and snuffed them out and won the game. The last play of that game was, I think, 4th and goal, or not last play of the game, but the last play of essentially the game there was like 4th and goal at the 3 or 4. I can't remember what it was. And that game, what they had, a playoff game, they got mics everywhere. And at the same time, like, we're on the sideline and people made fun of me there because I'm just like, all right, red 3, like no stress at all. Like, just, I knew what I was calling. I knew what our guys were good at and what fit us. And we were the best red zone team in the league. And it was like, it's like having a 104-mile-an-hour fastball. Like, why am I throwing anything else? Go. Well, at the same time, that 4th and 3 comes up, and they had everything mic'd up, and DQ and Sarkisian are like going back and forth. They're like, he's bringing the house. He's bringing the house. And Sarkisian, I know he is. I know it is. Well, they called Q8. They called sprint out to the right, which is a really good call if you're bringing the house, because you get the quarterback out of danger and you'd have Julio Jones one-on-one. Well, we didn't blitz ever in red zone. Like, I don't know why they would think I would blitz in the red zone then. Like, all year, we'd like never blitzed. Anyway, we played red 3. Well, our guys were so comfortable with that call. And it also let them know I had confidence in them. I didn't need to pull a call out of, out of thin air. I could go with our bread and butter and what we did. So it chilled everybody out. And the communication was so automatic that now they could zero in on the offense. And like at the exact same time, I had Rodney McLeod, Malcolm Jenkins, Corey Graham, Nigel Bradham. There was somebody else, Jalen Mills, all at the exact time pointing to the indicator that was going to be sprint out. And we played that sprint out perfectly. And they had nowhere to go with the ball, and he threw it up. And people give Julio little grief about dropping that ball. Even if he caught it, both feet were out of bounds. I mean, not just one, both feet were out of bounds. But we won the game. And that came from, that was a classic example of like just doing what you do well. And there's, I think one thing that gets lost a little bit in the analytics is the confidence that you give with the players when you do that. We played San Francisco when I was in Cleveland a couple years ago, and we could play. I have a great career record. I have no idea why, because I think he's the best offense coordinator in the league, but I had a great career record against Kyle. And we were going to accomplish what we were going to accomplish. We were going to play like, I ended up playing like almost all of our snaps out of basically one defense. I told the players, like, don't get tired of hearing it. I'm not going to get tired of calling it. It fits. This is what we're going to do. So like you as analytics guys, the whole thing with the unscouted play, right? The unscouted play has, whatever percentage better chance to succeed than others. Well, I had people tell me all the time, well, Schwartz, you should hold some blitz that you've never run before. Hold it in your back pocket. And then you get a late game situation. You can break that out and you'll have a big advantage. Well, I'm like, yeah. I said, how about if that's a situation, how about I call something that we're really good at that fits our guys really well? And also the message that you send to your players. You tell them you're good enough. I got confidence in you. You don't say, I need to make this call. I have to blitz or do this, exotic call because I have to make the difference. And then they look around and say, well, he doesn't have confidence in us. So that was a classic example, the end of that game, the way that came. You mentioned the winding that game. They were driving at the end of the third quarter. And Rodney McLeod got a sack on first time. I had a safety blitz, and we basically knocked that drive out. And like you said, once the wind flipped in the fourth, they weren't going to really make any field goals. Now it was going to have to be touchdowns, and that changed the way that game got played also. That game, if we don't play great defense in that game, we don't win and we don't have the Super Bowl. In the Super Bowl, if we don't play great offense, because defense was struggling, if we don't play offense, we don't win that game. So it was sort of interesting the way that the play, when we played Minnesota, we hit on all cylinders. We played great on offense, great on defense, and sort of blew them out. But it's interesting, like the way that went We don't even make the Super Bowl without a great defensive performance against Atlanta. And also, we don't win the Super Bowl without a great offensive performance.
You mentioned some of the offensive guys in the league, Shanahan, LaFleur, McVay. Like, who are some of the guys that coach defense that you kind of admire and look at and study?
Yeah, the guys that I really respect are guys that have done it for a long time. I had an analytics guy, and I don't even know how he did it, but he had done a study basically of the best defensive coordinators over the last 20 years, and he had all these different priorities. He used something like how the team expected performance versus its performance under that coach. Well, the best coaches in the league were, I'm not going to give you the order, but it was me, Wade Phillips, Vic Fangio, Brian Flores, and also a guy that flew way under the radar. Great coach, a guy named Keith Butler, who was at Pittsburgh. Now, they also had great play. I mean, they had James Harrison and all those, complete dogs, but they played great defense over that run that he was the coordinator. And, like Wade, I love Wade. Wade's a great guy. I'd love to have him at a party. I'd love to pick his brain. And the way we pick each other's brains is we watched a film. And Wade was one of the first guys I ever looked at that just was belligerent and saying, yeah, we're not going to do very much. We're just going to be really good. Like, what are you trying to do? Are you trying to be good or are you trying to be innovative? And he, it wasn't hard figuring out what Wade was trying to do. He just did what he did. Vic developed that quarter halves. I ran that as a game plan adjustment against Green Bay back in 2014. I played, and Vic had not only even think it played it yet, but it was roll strong, quarters weak, completely eliminated the strong side passing game from Green Bay. We held up on the back shoulders. We held him to, I think at the time, his lowest total. Actually, I think until this week 16 game when we played Pittsburgh this year, it was the next lowest total of his throwing in his career. Anyway, Vic basically took that, which was, like a little one-off game plan thing. And that's what they did. Like when you were playing Vic, it's like, okay, this is what they're playing. They're really good at it. They don't make mistakes, and it fits them, really well. B-Flow is going to bring the house. He knows. I mean, that's what they do. They're good at it, and it fits them. I think when you looked at, and Butts at Pittsburgh, they were running their fire zone defense, and like they didn't change. That's what they had run it for years. They were really good at it. So again, I really respected that. It was interesting that those are the names that this guy came up with as best play callers or coordinators over the last 20 years, because all those guys had in common that, number one, they had adjusted as their careers had gone. When Vic used to be a Tom Capers 3-4 Pittsburgh scheme. And he transformed into something else. But most of the success that those guys had was being really good at what they did, and didn't feel the need to grab bag and and do more and make a bunch of mistakes or things like that. So that's those are the guys that I would always make sure that I would watch whenever they came around, because we all try to steal something from everybody else, and not just, sometimes you're taking it right off of the tape, but other times you're saying, wow, that's a great idea. This is the way I can use that for my guys, and you can change it. I mentioned Seattle 3, like Legion of Boom. We took their Seattle 3, made a couple small adjustments, but significant small adjustments, and it became, something new. When I was in Philly, I took Monty Kiffin's Tampa 2 and just completely inverted it and turned it into, we called it cover 8, but it was just an invert cover 2, and they call them NTTs now, non-traditional Tampas. But basically it was just like just like sort of not rolling the dice, but just mixing everybody up, throwing them out there, and everybody would play a different position. And it fit us really well because it showed middle high, single high, which is what we played. And it changed at the last minute that it was really Tampa 2. And it was just the corners were playing the halves, and the nickel and the linebacker were buzzing and playing the corners, and the free safety was playing the Mike runner. And it changed the picture for quarterback. And it was perfect for us because we played so much single high and we had that 104-mile-an-hour fastball that became our changeup. And it, you need that changeup for your fastball. And it blurred the lines. Quarterbacks couldn't tell, like, what is that? Is he staying in the post or is he robbing? And, that was the success that we had. And I mean, I was the person that developed that in the NFL. That scheme has my name on it, for lack of a better word. People used to call it Philly 2 and all these different things. And a lot of people have copied it since. But I really copied it from Monty, because I took Monty Kiffin's scheme and changed it a little bit, where Greg Williams had worked to change it a little bit. Greg was the first guy to play Tampa 2 with the safety playing the middle runner. The nickel would bail to the half, and then the Mike linebacker would replace the nickel. But it was Tampa 2. And that was the first I ever saw. It was like, oh, you can just switch these guys in position a little bit. And I had run some robber schemes. My robber schemes went way back to University of Washington Huskies with Steve Entman and all their up G stuff. And they played a lot of robber, but it was a lot of man-based robber, right? You're buzzing guys out and playing man pickup. It wasn't true zone. So I played that in career. Used to break that against Peyton Manning every once in a while, and, had run it in Philly in 2017 was the first time that I ever ran it completely out of a Tampa shell. But then you start getting into that. And like when I was in Buffalo, we played decent amount of Tampa. But one of the things I did, like, we could force the center slide because we had a really good defensive line. We had Kyle Williams, we had Marcel Darius, Mario Williams, Jerry Hughes. We had some crazy, like, I think 50-some defensive line sacks. I never had the blitz, right? Because you just let those 4 guys go rush. But we could pretty much determine where to center slide, a little bit like having Myles Garrett, right? We can talk about how Myles changes the game, but Kyle Williams would get the attention. I mean, he was so good a one-on-one rusher, they had to slide to him. Well, we could blitz a linebacker and then drop Kyle, right? And people have done that for years in cover 3 world, or even like a defense like one hole or one rat, whatever people want to call it. You have a hole player, and then you have a 4-man pass rush. Well, you blitz one guy, and then you drop one of the defensive linemen. It's not hard for that guy to play the hole, and you're still rushing 4 and playing hole. But back then, now they're called sim pressures. We used to call them exchange blitzes. 2 guys were just exchanging blitz. Well, I ran that, and and people used to run it out of the cover 3 world. I mentioned Pittsburgh and, and what those guys did with Dick LeBeau, like, originated some of that stuff, but it was mainly out of a 3-and-1 world. I think I might have been the first guy in the NFL to run a sim where we blitzed the linebacker and dropped the defensive lineman, and we played Tampa 2 behind it. And it was literally that simple. It was like, all right, we're going to blitz the will linebacker and defensive tackle away from the will. You're going to replace him. And we had tremendous success. And then you saw other teams around the league saying, okay, well, if we do this, then we can do something else. And all of a sudden it caught on like wildfire. People copied the scheme and did it exactly like we did. But then people started running more stuff. And that became like wildfire in the NFL, people running sim pressures. And a lot of it, some of it comes out of the cover 4 world, but a lot of it comes out of the NTT, the non-traditional Tampas. That's one of the things that robber coverage that I ran, the double invert, that made it really easy to bluff and to run sim pressures, because you could have defensive linemen that could drop into those spots and they could handle that assignment. It wasn't like they were trying to cover a tight end or trying to peel on a running back, and you could get a bad situation. But those were really successful for us. But again, it goes to your personnel. Like, I think last year I dropped Myles Garrett 1 time the whole year, and it was probably 1 time too many, right? And, the analytics people come and, they're looking at what's successful and what's not. And, they always wanted to run more sim pressures. Hey, sim pressures have success around the league. You should run more. And then be like, okay, yeah, I get it. But, you want Myles Garrett dropping? How about we let Myles Garrett rush, and then, but, so much of that, sort of goes into that. But to go back, Nick, yeah, we've all sort of borrowed from each other, stolen from each other. You have people that you respect. When it's all said and done, it's taking something somebody else did and then making it your own. And it might be just a little bit of a tweak here, a little bit of a different tweak. But, all those guys that are playing with Vic, the Vic Fangio split safety thing, learn from him. But Vic was picking it up from other people that he was watching earlier. Hey, that was really good what Schwartz did against Green Bay. Well, wow, I can do this with it, and then I can make it even better for us. And that's what the good coaches do.
This has been amazing, and I feel like people are gonna be pestering us to get you on here more. So anytime you want to come on, you've got the green light. And for anybody who's watching, we'd love to hear some comments on what you think or questions. And there's so many things we could talk about.
Yeah, I think we could do an hour on quarterback sneaks. I heard you guys the other last week or whatever talking about the change in the quarterback sneaks and all the different, but with the way quarterback sneaks were back in '93 compared to what they transformed to, how you defend them defensively, how it, all this different stuff. And also now the plays that people are running off of the push looks and all the different stuff. Like seriously, we could do an hour on that. We could do an hour on that Super Bowl in Philly and all the things that happened in that game and the adjustments, the way we game plan James White in that game. And even though it doesn't, the first half, we played a lot. We didn't play great, but we played pretty good in the first half. I think we gave up 12 in the first half of that game. And then they made the adjustment and said, "Hey, we're coming back with Gronk." And like I said, late in that game, when I told Doug, "Hey, look, if they get 2 first downs, we're either going to stop them or they're going to score because I'm going to get the ball back to you, and we're not going to give them a chance to have the ball back last because it was shaping up to that kind of game. Whoever had the ball last was going to win that game." But I'd be glad to come back on, and it's been fun because, it just sort of, we've had these conversations for the last 10 years. They just haven't been recorded.
All right. Well, Jim, thank you so much. That was amazing. It was incredible. Make sure you guys subscribe, leave a comment, and we'll talk to you next time.